In this session, we're going to talk about prayer as a partnership with God. It's just a different way to say it again. We're covering ground and overlapping, and I don't mind that. I think we talked that first session about John didn't mind saying and Peter didn't mind saying, I know you know this stuff. I'm just going to remind you again. I'm going to remind you again. And a good parent does that. A good coach does that. Good business leaders go back over mission statements and vision statements. They post them. We've talked about that in Deuteronomy 6. Post what you believe and what you want for your family, for your organization, for your team, for your country. Post them, make them visible, review them continuously. This is all part of how humans are made. God made us this way, and having visible reminders and audible reminders is part of how growth happens and how growth is reproduced, and that's what we'll do again here. So partnership. 2 Corinthians 5:20 says, we are his ambassadors. We are his spokesmen. We are his hands and feet. We use that terminology sometime. And then we have this promise. So we have a partnership with him that he's going to do stuff and stop doing stuff based on our communicating with him and asking for stuff to start and to stop. We talked about that. Here's the promise, 1 John 5:14 and 15. But think about this a little more deeply. This is the confidence, assurance. This is the confidence we have in approaching God, that if we ask anything according to his will, and we know that his word is his will, and his promises are our will. So when we find a promise, George Mueller based his whole work with orphanages. And he ended up having 5 multi-story buildings, and at the heyday, 2,000 orphans. He fed and housed daily and educated and did spiritual growth for those interested. Based on one verse where God said in the Bible, I care for orphans and widows. And so he would go back to God continuously and say, you said you care for orphans, and I'm trying to care for orphans. And you said you'd provide for orphans, so I'm asking you to provide for orphans. And based on that simple portion of a verse, he fed and housed increasingly at the heyday up to 2,000 orphans. Think about the transformational lives of growing in that kind of community with that godly man who was generous and a giver, who had a vertical relationship, who had horizontal relationships, who evangelized and discipled, who funded missions and missionaries, was himself one, etc. He hung it all on one portion of a verse that God loves the poor and the powerless, and God looks after the widow and the orphan. And he used God's promise. He reminded, same way as my daughter does. If I say we're going to go to Dairy Queen today, no matter what time it is, she'll say, we're going to Dairy Queen, right? Because you said we're going to Dairy Queen. And as a good father, a flawed father, but trying to be a good father, I say, dagnabbit. Though I don't want to go now, it's late in the day, and I don't want to get back in the car, and I already shut everything down. We're going to have to go to Dairy Queen because I told her we would. And God is perfect Father. And He asks us to hold them accountable to His will, which is His word. And so when He says, have this confidence, God's a good Father. He described Himself by looking at the opposite in Luke 18 with the unjust judge. And He said, I'm just, this guy's unjust. An unjust judge will give people stuff because they're wearing them out. What would a loving Father do if that's what an unloving father would do if you persevere in asking? If we ask anything according to here's what He says. I love this in the English. He says, we know that He hears us. And we know that we have received, past tense, by faith. It's not will receive. You have received it. It's yours right now by faith. In the same way, when I say to Riley, my 7-year-old, we're going to Dairy Queen, she isn't thinking we will go. She thinks we're going. I said it. I'm trustworthy as a father if I am. She knows it's done. She doesn't know when. She doesn't know how, but she knows it's done. She has received it already because somebody trustworthy has said, we're going. So she isn't sitting there saying, I wonder when we're going to go. She just knows it's going to happen. That's the same way prayer works with a righteous God. We have received it now by faith. We'll eventually receive it by sight, mystery, on this planet or off this planet. He's saying, what? You don't have it in the 60 or 80 or 100 years you're alive, but you're going to have it for 500 billion. So, you got it for 500 billion. Why are you sweating about whether you get it on this planet in your little old speck of 100 years? This is the confidence we have in approaching Him. We know that He hears us, and we know that it's ours. Just don't know when, don't know how. But you can know it. You can know it because of the depth of your intimacy with Him, which is nurtured so that you know He's good, and He knows what's best for His glory in us. And it's always true, and it's always right, and it's always perfect. It's always a victory. It's just a matter of time. That's why we know it's going to be okay. That's cool. That's a partnership with somebody that you trust infinitely more than anybody you've ever seen or heard. We can know our prayers are heard. We can know we can receive answers. Think about that. That's so unbelievable. Don't know when, we don't know how, but we do know the answer is yes and amen. On this planet or off this planet. And if not on this planet, far better than we can ask or imagine. It's a win all the way around. Let's talk a little bit about prayer plans right now. We'll use this terminology a lot. We use it in the school of discipleship. We use it in the school of sports ministry. We use it in this class in prayer, and that is this. Walk with God, be with people, have a plan. That's a little saying we say. Walk with God, be with people, have a plan. Whatever it is that you want to get good at, etc., or want to accomplish, right? So walk with God is our vertical relationship. Walk with people is our horizontal relationship with unbelievers, evangelism, believers, disciples. Have a plan. Have a plan for evangelism. Have a plan for discipleship. What's your plan to win souls? Do you have a plan? What's your plan to make disciples? Now, we've already talked about it. If you haven't been discipled, hard for you to have a plan to disciple if you didn't even know you were supposed to do that. And if you did read the verse, go make disciples, and you were never discipled and haven't heard an articulation about discipleship, you would think that just means kind of go to church and stuff will happen and that's discipleship, which I would contend would be a bad plan. Well, frankly, it is no plan. Have a plan. Make sure it's a good plan. Execute the plan. Let's go back through that again. Walk with God, be with people, have a plan. Right now, this class is on prayer. Walk with God, be with people, have a plan. Have a plan to pray. Walk with God, pray to God. Walk with people, pray with people and for people. Have a plan. Now, second category. Have a plan, make sure it's a good plan, and execute the plan. That's another little threefold thing to keep in mind. Have a plan, make sure it's a good plan, execute the plan. If you have a plan, and it's not a good plan, that's a bad plan by nature. If you have a plan and it's a good plan, but you don't execute the plan, that's a bad plan. It was a good plan, but if you don't execute it, one of my sons, when he was younger, he wanted to put his goals on the wall. And they were good goals. They were awesome goals. He put them on a whiteboard and he posted them in his room. But when he was younger, he didn't have a plan to execute it. He just had a plan. So none of the stuff was accomplished, though it looked good on paper. It's like a mission statement and a vision statement for a business or a family or a church that they don't even have a plan to implement it. It looks great. It looks awesome. They took all this time. They met. They had seminars. They spent a lot of time coming up with this vision statement, this mission statement, but there's no plan to execute it. Thus, it doesn't get executed. Thus, what good is it on the wall if it isn't practically played out in a way that brings transformation? So, walk with God, be with people, have a plan. Have a plan. Make sure it's a good plan. Execute the plan. What is your plan to pray? Is it a good plan? If you have a plan, is it a good plan? Is it actually producing the results that you want, whatever that is? And whatever plan you have, are you actually executing it? So I want to pray 10 minutes in the morning. I want to pray throughout the day. I want to pray once a week with Johnny or Susie, or I want to pray with my wife or my husband. Whatever it is your plan is, what is it? If you don't have a plan, the odds are your prayer life is not functioning or functional. If you have a prayer plan for yourself and whatever is you're responsible for, your family, your business, your church, whatever, this is a seminary. It's also a university, so some folks in here are wanting to be pastors or Christian leaders, etc. Some want to do it vocationally. Some want to do it as tent makers. They want to do it on the side. Everybody's responsible to do it. Everybody's responsible to pray, etc. What is your plan for your prayer life? Is it a good plan? Are you executing the plan? Do you have it written down or is it all in your head? If you write it down, you got a better chance. Doesn't mean you have to have it written down. But what is it? Are you executing it? Is it good? These are all questions that we ask. When I come into a community, church, if I'm there as a consultant or whatever for a business or a parachurch organization, and they want to talk about prayer or teach on prayer, whatever the thing is, I'll try to gauge the community by asking certain questions. And these questions will tell me if they have a plan, and if it's a good plan, and executing the plan. Now, they may think they know, and they may know, or they may think they know and they don't know. Let me explain this. It's a 4-quadrant diagram. There's 4 quadrants. The first category is I know that I know. The second category is I know that I don't know. The third category is I don't know that I know. And the fourth category is I don't know that I don't know. Let's just use an example. Let's say I'm going to take soccer again because it's a universal sport. You can know that you know about soccer. That's good. You can know that you don't know about soccer. So you want to learn about soccer. You realize you don't know much. And so the way to learn about it is to find somebody who knows soccer and learn it, right? We talked about the ways to learn. It's a good thing to know that you don't know because then you'll get help. It's a good thing to know that you know because then you've accomplished the goal. Some people know soccer, but they don't know that they know, meaning they just grew up with it and they play it, but they couldn't explain it. They couldn't talk about it. They wouldn't even know what people would need to know to understand it because it's just what they've always done. That's not a good place to be. To not know that you know about something means it's not reproducible. You can't share that with anybody else, and even if somebody approached you, you wouldn't know what to say. So good for that person, but bad for everybody else because he has no capacity to articulate it. And then this fourth category is you don't know soccer. That means you don't know soccer, you think you do, and you don't know that you don't know. That's a bad deal because this person continuously thinks he knows the game when he doesn't and thinks when he's explaining it, people understand it and they don't. He can't get any help because he's deceived to think he knows soccer when he doesn't, and he doesn't know that he doesn't know. Think about prayer. That's what we're getting to. When I come into a community, if they have a plan and it's a good plan and they're executing the plan, prayer is happening. All the different kinds of prayer are happening. Tacos prayer happening. Long praying. They anoint with oil. All the pieces in the doctrine of prayer or practice, they would know that they know. And if they did, they're probably humble about it. And I would go in and I could see by observation and by articulation that there's an integration. They talk about it and they cover the ground and they actually do it with a regular, sustainable pattern. It's reproducible. It's oral. It's simple. Know that they know. Then there's folks that know that they don't know. They say, I was interviewed once and this was the interview. The guy said this. He said, I pray, you pray, I don't really pray. Right? Our church prays. I know you know how to pray. Our church really doesn't pray. They pray kind of, but not really. Does that make sense? So this church or this parachurch organizations, they know that they don't know. That's a good spot to be. They really don't know, but they know that they don't know, so they can get help. You individually, me individually, if I know I don't know something, I have an option to learn it. That's not a bad spot. You don't want to stay there, but that's not a bad spot to be. The guy who's praying, the church that has a prayer life, but they've never articulated it, they've never organized it, they don't have a plan, they're doing something that's good about prayer, but they don't even know what or why. They don't even know their how. They just prayed because this doesn't happen much. But they don't know that they know. They are praying. The church has a prayer life. Their community does. But they don't even know it. They can't reproduce it or articulate it. It's good for them and not for everybody else. Remember that analogy? I don't remember if I used it in this class. If I eat for a fish, if I eat a fish, then I eat for a day. Which is good. I can feed myself. But you starve. If I teach you how to fish, then we both eat together. So I know how to eat fish, and I teach you how to catch fish and eat fish. And if we teach others how to fish and eat fish and catch fish, then everybody eats forever. So the goal is not for me to just eat fish, because then I'm healthy and everybody else starves. The goal is not even for you and I to catch fish and eat fish, because then we are sustained and healthy and everybody else starves. Our goal is that we teach others how to fish, then everybody eats forever. In the same way, in this quadrant, if a church or a community prays, but they don't know how to communicate it or articulate it or reproduce it, then they get to pray as long as they live, but nobody else learns how to pray from them or with them. And thus their little church community is vibrant with God and nobody else is. And everybody gets soiled by their ignorance that this needs to be shared and passed along. The fourth category of those churches or parachurches or whatever that feel like they have a prayer life and they really don't. They have a prayer meeting once a month. They have a prayer meeting that is really a Bible study that they pray 5 or 10 minutes at the end. The staff really doesn't pray together, and they don't pray long ever. And there's not opportunities for the flock to learn how to pray. They just see a guy up front who's the professional pray. And so they feel like they pray because they believe in prayer. And if you asked them to articulate it, they could articulate the doctrine of prayer. But practically, it's not happening. They don't know that they don't know how to produce a community of prayer that's sustainable and can reproduce so that these people can do it outside of that building and teach others how to do it also. And so our goal is to, if asked, be able to articulate a biblical vision of what prayer looks like individually and corporately in the body of Christ. That's the goal, the target, is to have a dynamic personal and corporate prayer life. Our goal then is to move folks, and that's what this class is about too, because there may be some in here that are sitting down and saying, whoa, I thought I prayed, but I realized maybe I don't know. I don't know that there's lots of ways to pray, different kinds of prayer. We'll talk about that even more here coming up. So we're trying to move folks from ignorance to knowledge. Ignorance, again, doesn't mean stupid or foolish. It just means they didn't know. They thought a prayer life was praying before and after meals, before and after games, and when a bad thing happens, to pray that God would somehow fix it. They don't understand the varieties of prayer. They don't understand the principles of prayer. They just understand the little they got from whoever they got it from. And again, if your local church doesn't have a plan, or if they don't have a good plan, then that's what they're going to learn about prayer, which is difficult then to reproduce in a functioning, healthy way. So we try to move people from ignorance to knowledge through education. This class is an example of that. Through example, by praying. But if you pray and you can't interact with the people who just saw you pray, it's harder for them to do it. They're just going to do what you did, but they won't know why, and they won't know how, and they won't know how to communicate with others. That's not helpful. So moving people from ignorance to knowledge is important, that they can gain an understanding and an awareness about the responsibility of a believer to pray. We partner with God. This is a prayer partnership. We're His ambassadors. He taught the disciples how to pray, and they taught others how to pray. This was their responsibility, to both pray and to teach others how to pray. To teach them the what, why, and the how. To teach them the different principles. To teach them the variety of doctrinal positions that affect them. It's not going to happen in a day or a week or a month, but over time, in relationship with God, in relationship with the body of Christ, this is the goal, that the ball moves forward intentionally, strategically, orally, relationally, simply, so that people's prayer life allows them to walk with God for a lifetime, finish strong, reproduce, and multiply. Question for you, for us, is do I pray? If I ask people if they pray, most will say yes. And then they'll say something like this. They'll say, well, if I'm honest with you, I probably should pray more. But then the natural question is, if you should pray more, why don't you? And now we're back to ignorance, unbelief, Fear the cost. If they know they should pray more, then they're probably not ignorant. If they know they should pray more and they say that, and the vast majority of Christians would say that, then it's probably not unbelief because they believe they should pray more because they believe that it has impact. So now we're down to fear and the cost. And you could throw in that not having a plan, which is why we try to get you to think about, what is my plan? What is my plan? Is there high enough expectation in my plan? Or do I have low expectations, in which case you're going to have low output, low impact, should we call it that? So we try to move people once they get to a spot of saying that I know I should pray more. We try to move them from acknowledgement of that, which is good. That's honest. That's humbling. To then what are we going to do about that? We want them to move from not knowing to know, to be honest that they realize they know that they don't know, and then to move them to know that they know. Can you see how that works in a church or with a person, with your disciples? Anticipate they don't know. Give them awareness so they can know that they don't know. And then move them to the point where they know that they know. And if they come to the point of the cost and they say, I just don't have time, then you have to give them the very hard but simple truth that nobody has time. You make time for what matters. You make time for what matters. And if it matters, you'll make time. And if it doesn't matter, it won't make time. And get them to be honest about that too. Get them to have integrity. Integrity means there's an integration. They believe God that prayer matters, but they don't pray. They know they should do more, but they don't want to make time to do it. Then they either don't really believe it matters, or they got to make some really decisive decisions about how they spend their time. Because they got to weigh what matters here versus the other things they're doing that doesn't matter. And if they say, my time is full with things that are important, odds are super good that's a lie. And all you got to do is check their phone and check their computer and realize what they're doing and how they're using their time. And if they're courageous enough, they might be willing to do that. But usually people have a conviction about that before you press them on that point.